Hi, I'm Miranda Gretton, and you're listening to Take a Moment with NCHC. In this new series of the podcast, I sit down with some more senior members of staff to find out how they made their way into their leadership roles.
Hi, I'm Liz Cooke. I'm the Director of HR and OD. I'm an Essex girl by birth. I was born in Southend, and I can do the accent when needed. My parents moved to a small town in Suffolk called Woodbridge when I was a baby, so I grew up in Woodbridge. Trained as a nurse in Cambridge, did my IPD qualifications in Surrey. So now I've moved around a lot.
So why did you become a nurse in the first place?
Well, I was actually born with a cleft palate, so I had surgery at a very young age to repair a hole in the roof of my mouth, and then went on to have 12 years of speech therapy. So I spent a lot of time in hospitals, and they became very familiar and comforting places. And so I do remember going for my nursing interview, and I went to Addenbrooke's Hospital where I applied to do my nurse training. And I walked in, and it smelt like a familiar place. It was that antiseptic smell, which most people hated, I loved. And it felt familiar and it felt homely, and it always has felt familiar and a good place to me. So I think it was I spent a lot of time in hospital as a child. I was always very curious about it. I always wanted to work with people, and probably I'm at that of that age that when I went to school, it was one of the few options that was given to you. So, and it's something that I've always been very proud of. Even if I didn't continue with it, I've always been very proud that that's where I started.
You must have had a good experience as a child then in the
I,
hospital.
yes, absolutely. I mean, I went a lot. It's probably wrapped up with other things. So, my treatment was in a London hospital. So I used to go to Hackney every 6 weeks for a very long time. So it was a bit of a day out as well. So, and my uncle was in the police force then, and he used to pick us up in his police car and blue light us to Hackney. So all the things that you would never do now. It was always positive, and they were really good. So I remember from very early age I used to have a camera put down the back of my throat to see how my vocal cords were developing and how my palate was interacting with everything else. And it was explained so well. It was never, I mean, it's a horrible procedure, but it never felt like, because it was, so I saw really good interaction and good care.
That's really interesting.
Well, so which explains for people who are listening why I'm probably a bit nasal. I haven't got a cold. People often ask me, do you have a cold? And it's no, this is how I talk.
Good to know.
As I say, I trained as a nurse originally. I'd kind of I qualified. I did what most people did in those days, is that I did my 6 months surgical, my 6 months medical, and then went traveling, worked in a bar in Spain for a while, came back and had a staffing job in a surgical unit. And although it was very complicated and complex, I realised I wanted something more, and I didn't know what that more was. So I took myself back to university to get more qualifications, basically, and looked at HR because it was a transferable skill. Was never going back to the NHS ever. Worked for P&O for 4 years at the Port of Felixstowe, which was a very good training ground for a young HR female professional with 5,000 men, and a very trade unionised, old-fashioned culture. But I learnt so much. I learnt so much there. The Port of Felixstowe was sold by P&O to a Hong Kong-based company called Hutchison Whampoa, and they gave my job to a man. So I knew I didn't have a future. So I came to Norfolk because it was the first job I could get. And it was for the Norfolk College of Nursing and Midwifery to transfer them from an NHS institution into higher education. So that's how long ago that was.
So you trained as a nurse, but then you
Yes.
decided you wanted something more. So you thought you'd go to HR. So why did you say you'd never go back to the NHS?
So rather interestingly, the bit I loved the most about my nurse training was community. And my long-term plan was to be a health visitor, but I just felt I didn't have enough life experience. So I didn't feel at sort of 22 I could train as a health visitor. I think it's very different now because I think the way that the careers are structured is very different. So I took myself off to university, and a whole new world opened to me, a whole new different environment. And I kind of thought I was going to do this whole corporate cut and thrust type of world, and I wasn't coming back to the NHS because I was going to, run law firms and that kind of thing. But of course, I think there's something in your being that actually brings you back. And actually, I think, if you cut me in half, you probably would see NHS written through it. I care passionately about it. And so I think I never planned to come back, but something called me back, I think, is how it happened.
Interesting. And so, and Norfolk was, you said it was the job, there was a job
Yes,
here.
yes,
So
yes.
you weren't looking specifically for anything. It was literally just like casting your net far and
Yeah,
wide. You would
I
have gone
mean,
anywhere.
it was the early 90s. There weren't many jobs around, so you basically went for what was available. And I knew I couldn't stay in a organization that was not going to recognize my qualifications because I was a girl. And I mean, it was that simple.
So have you faced discrimination in other jobs, or was it just the one at the Port of Felixstowe?
I mean, if you looked at the culture, it was hardly surprising. But I was very young and very naive, so I just thought, well, I'd never come across it before. And actually moving from a culture of the team that we worked in as nurses, it was a very strange and different culture. I've always said, nursing is an amazing job, and what was one that you get instant feedback, absolutely instant feedback on what you do. There's a huge sense of camaraderie in a team. You're working to a single goal. You walk into a lot of corporate environments, and it's not like that at all. So that was really surprising to me. But it was very commercially driven. It got me to understand a lot. The thing that really stood out for me, that I hope I've brought back with me, is everybody understood why they were there. So whilst I was there, I was a very junior HR officer, and my division was engineering. So I was 23 with a hard hat and a orange viz jacket walking into engineering shops. You can imagine they just thought I was ridiculous. But we lost a major company, so we lost a major client overnight, and £8 million just went from the bottom line literally overnight. And I remember being in the toilets the next day, and the cleaner was in there, and they absolutely understood the implications of it. Absolutely got what it meant, because they saw their bit, they saw their role in that, that process. And it's a bit like, the cleaner that says, I put rockets on the moon. At the Port of Felixstowe, the cleaner absolutely understood the implications of losing £8 million. I'm not sure in the NHS we are comfortable with money and comfortable with the concept of money. And I hope what I've tried to bring around that is that it is a real skill to understand it, and to understand the implications of things. When we lose big contracts, what does it mean? When we gain contracts, what does it mean? What does commissioning mean? To a first line leader, what implications is it for them? So I hope, in terms of the things that we've developed here, that we have those conversations.
I think you're right, and I think that's really important for senior leadership, because if say you stayed a nurse and you sort of risen all the way through
I
and you'd
wouldn't have
stayed in the
understood it at
NHS.
all.
No,
Mm,
exactly, and I think it does take that fresh pair of eyes
mm,
sometimes to see that. And everybody working to the same goal. I think it's so important that whatever we do, any decision we make, is because of a patient, is because of the
mm,
patient
mm,
care fundamentally. And it is quite easy to forget that when you're in a corporate environment, when you're in
mm,
support services, and you're not on the front line, you're not in the community. It is quite easy to forget that. So
mm,
yeah, I
mm.
think you're absolutely right. What made you then want to move up into leadership?
I don't necessarily know that it was an ambition. I think it is something that just happened. I love working with people. I love engaging with people. I'm an extreme extrovert, so that sort of talking, engaging is very much part of how I function and how I get my energy. And so I don't know. I think I'm a good communicator. Maybe that's why I kind of, people sort of pushed me to the front. I don't think I always stepped forward. Quite a lot of the time, you look around and there's no one else, so you go, okay, I'll do it. I did the job at the College of Nursing and Midwifery, finished. I moved to the James Paget, and I was there for a very long time. I had a very inspirational boss. he would say things like, I've got a great learning opportunity for you, which basically meant there was a really difficult project and could you go and do it? But I think if other people have the confidence that you can do it, then you believe it yourself and you can go. And I hope I've installed that with my own team in terms of you have the skills to do this. You absolutely do. Go and give it a go. And we all make mistakes. You all learn from them. I say failure is a really important part of learning. And so I think it was more by default than a burning desire.
Would you ever go back? I mean, well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because nobody really wants to go backwards. But
Well,
do you love
my
your job?
I do love my job and I love working for this organisation. I think my team would wince because whenever somebody phones me up and asks me about maternity policy and I get it wrong, the team, you can see the look of fear in their eyes that I might possibly go back and be an HR business partner one day. I really believe in business partnering. I think that's where I really learnt my craft. And I think, HR is 99% about relationship management and how you create relationships with people so that they have confidence in you and so that you can help them make the right decisions. But I came to NCH&C on a 6-week secondment, and it's 10 years this year. So
6 weeks isn't very long, is it?
no, it was an interesting time, and Paul Crackman and I sort of reminisced about this when he left. I came at a very interesting time. NCH&C was a very different place then, and it's been lovely to be part of its development and for it to become the great organisation that I think it is.
Obviously, you would have been here then when we were getting the outstanding
Mm.
accreditation. So that is something to be hugely proud of. But what would you want to see change or evolve in the trust moving forward from this point, do you think?
I think it's important that we keep growing and we keep developing. I think we still have a lot to do in terms of making sure everybody's voice is heard, making sure that we offer equality of opportunity, that we really focus on talent management and staff retention. 2 years into a pandemic, how tired everybody is, and that we really focus on what we can do to help and support people. I worked in acutes for years, and you are very isolated in your opinion in acutes because you're this big place and it's all very important and it's always high drama and everything is around a 4-hour wait and how you manage your emergency services and all of that and you don't look outside. And it was a very steep learning curve for me to come here and really understand that a hospital is a very short part of somebody's life. And actually, it's what you do for 95 of the rest of the time that's so much more important. And I think, we must continue to sort of push that message in terms of, what we can do to keep people out of hospital is more important about when they go in.
Do you find then from an HR perspective that the challenges are different at a community trust to an acute for the
I,
staff?
Yeah, I mean, communication is hugely challenging, as you know, because in an acute hospital, you just walk down a corridor and go and talk to somebody. Here it's a 40-mile drive, so that's hugely challenging. Trying to get a consistent culture is very difficult. Trying to get people to remember who you are is quite challenging because we always know when we do surveys, people think they're in the Norwich locality when they're in SOCs just because they work in Norwich. It's things like that, in terms of, and do people care, as well, because the most important thing to them is their immediate line manager. So there is something around that in terms of I really fundamentally believe that the most influential person in your working life is the person immediately above you. So it's really important that we give those people the right skills to make sure that they're the ones that are encouraging people or demonstrating to people that this is a good place to work.
And do you think you feel like that because you've had inspirational leaders?
Yes, I've had inspirational leaders and I've had terrible leaders. So I think you never forget either, actually.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Um, we've talked about what being a leader means to you,
Hmm.
but what does allyship mean to you?
I think it's understanding other people's truths. And I know that sounds a bit banal in terms of you can never experience someone else's life. So you have to listen to what they're telling you and not make your own version of it. One of my best friends is gay, and he and I met in the very early 80s at the height of the AIDS pandemic. And I'm trying to remember the name of that Channel 4 drama.
It's a sin.
It's a sin. So we lived that. My other close friend was a nurse on an infectious diseases ward, and we lived that. Metal doors, trays. That was real. So my best friend didn't come out till he was 25, and I have watched him throughout his life go from that to being married with 2 children. And so it shows the world does change. So he and his partner had children through surrogacy. They are a loving family, and he never thought that would happen to him. So I think it is around listening to his view of the world rather than applying my view of the world to him. And I do think, as a large employer, as a, if you talk about an anchor organisation, it is our responsibility to show that we are open to everybody, and that when you come here, it's who you bring to work that matters, not what you are. And I think that's what allyship means to me.
So, Liz, just to finish off, how do you deal with a particularly challenging day? How do you wind down at the end of the day?
I was having this conversation yesterday with my board colleagues. So work for me is where I feel like I know what I'm doing. It's the rest of my life that's quite challenging. I'm a single parent. I have 2 children. My oldest daughter is now at university, but has had periods of significant mental health issues. And my son has a learning disability. So my son has what's known as a mixed neurodevelopmental disorder. So my life outside of work is quite unpredictable, whereas work is quite predictable. But when I look to unwind, I like to run. I like to exercise. I love to cook. I love to socialise. Obviously, I have a wider circle of friends. So the pandemic was interesting. I did a lot of Zoom calls, and I like to laugh. I think laughter is very important. So I do things that I try and find the joy in stuff.
Thank you for listening to Take a Moment with NCHC. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please visit the podcast intranet page to leave a comment and for details of our other episodes. You can also follow NCHC on all social media channels.